Welcome to Cloud9 Writes Poetry, brought to you personally by Cloud, your SB Let's Player and fellow poetry writer. As you guys are probably not aware, I actually am an avid poetry writer. I try to write as often as I can, often every day. I can't even tell you how many poems I have written. So, being that this is the very first episode establishing the format, there are two things I'd like to accomplish with each episode. The first thing I'd like to do, after first having my cup of coffee, as every good writer should have, I would like to introduce a work of classic literature first, and then improvising a full-length poem right here, right now, right in front of your screen. Unfortunately, I couldn't select any more appropriate visuals, being that this is largely audio-driven, and the literature that I provide will be complemented with words on the screen, as you will see as soon as I read from the literature and I begin writing the poetry. So for this first episode, I would like to introduce a poem by Emily Dickinson, one of my personal favorite poets of all time. For those of you who are not aware, Emily Dickinson was a very prolific poetry writer, and that's putting it lightly. She wrote somewhere between 1,500 and 2,500 poems in her lifetime. Poems that she wrote could go from 4 lines to as many as 20 to 30 lines. So, yes, she wrote a lot of poetry. She also was a hermit for much of her life. For the last 30 years, and she lived to be in her 50s, she never left her house unless she absolutely had to, and she always wore white. Nobody was really sure why she started wearing white. Although I would like to think at this point that Emily Dickinson had Asperger's syndrome or some kind of autism that made her repetitive lifestyle appealing to her and just allowed her to work out a meaningful existence, especially in the realm of poetry. So for this first poem, as I will, opening my poetry book right here, my poetry compilation, any compilation of poems from this author is just outstanding, because the editor, I'm sure, will organize the poems according to just general themes. This particular compilation that I'm reading from has divided about a couple hundred poems into nature, love, time, and eternity. And for those of you who have watched SpongeBob in their youth, you may recognize this poem from the episode when SpongeBob starts invading people's dreams. Let me not mar that perfect dream by an auroral stain, but so adjust my daily night that it will come again. Emily Dickinson. Auroral, as indicated by the footnote, means of the dawn, so basically this means that, she's talking about the phenomenon of experiencing dreams. Human beings do dream every night. It's believed that most animals dream on a daily basis. Unfortunately, we forget 99.99% of our dreams. A lot of our dreams also do not occur episodically. They actually occur in the non-conscious state, deep in REM sleep, if you've ever studied sleep cycles in psychology. The episodic dreams that we attribute as just dreams in general, those occur at the very end of the night, normally right before we wake up. These dreams are usually the only ones we remember because they occur last. Unfortunately, what happens, as Emily Dickinson pointed out, the auroral stain of the dawn would erase the memory of the dream. Because if you're like me, and if you've ever actually tried to record your dreams, you'd have quite a pickle. Because dreams are not, they are not fully formed memories. They are imaginings in your head as rationalized by the sensory cortices of your brain. That's why you can see, you can hear, and maybe you can even experience other sensations like touch. Unless you record the dream in a way that can make it so that it can escape your short-term memory, your dreams normally will not be encoded to long-term memory. That's why shortly after waking up, unless you take deliberate action to record the dream, you will forget it. And that's just how it works. And that was Emily Dickinson. Thank you, Emily Dickinson. I am thanking you from 150 years in the future. Probably after the time of your death. You are a beautiful writer, and I'm sure we will see more works of yours in the future. Now, moving on to the second stage. Right now, before your very eyes, first time ever on YouTube, I will improvise a Dickinsonian poem, as I have likened to call them. Dickinsonian because, as I've read in the poetry compilation that I have, Emily Dickinson likes to write her poems in stanzas of 8, or either stanzas of 4 or stanzas of 8. Even number of an even number of paired lines. Usually, counting the number of syllables, it's an 8-6-8-6. So the first line always has 8 syllables, second line always has 6 syllables, followed by another couplet. And she'll do that so many times for a number of her poems. She doesn't necessarily do that for all of her poems. I've seen some really interesting styles of hers, especially like working stanzas into triads. So there will be 3 lines in the stanza, and the rhyme scheme also will divvy up. The rhyme scheme that I will be using will be A B C B D E F E. So the second and fourth lines will rhyme. The sixth and eighth lines will rhyme. This is the style that I use and have written. Oh my God, I don't even want to. It's not that I don't want to express like the experience that I have. I'd like to think at this point that I have a decent amount of experience writing poetry, but you're never done. There's always more to write. There's always more to do. So what's the point in even just hanging on to what I've already done when I can just do one right now? Anyway, so the poem that I'm going to be writing is an 8-line poem, 8-6-8-6, 8-6-8-6. The rhyme scheme with the second and fourth, yada yada yada. Let's proceed. I wonder what I would like to write about today. Well, it's a beautiful day out right now, sunny and mid-60s right now. A little breeze, but everything is growing in because we did actually have an amount of rain. And as far as subjects go, there are a number of different subjects I'd like to use. Depends on my mood, really, and then I'll actually end up talking about my mood in metaphor speech. You could talk about poetry. This is why I love poetry. It's incredibly flexible. You can write about you can write about your fingers. You can write about your computer screen. You can write about the sun, the birds, the stars, your sister, your brother, your mother, a stone that you found on your last stroll, the seashells that's hanging from the rafters outside of my deck right now. Some really interesting crap that my dad picked up on his last trip down south. So I'm just gonna talk about the weather. So it just rained. So, and I also try to use like interesting words. I have no compunction. I have no compunction to verb. I may be discovering the errors of my own pitfalls is trying to declare what is actually a largely non-declarative process. I have no compunctions. Compunctions plural. Compunctions just means like scruples. When you say you have no compunctions or no scruples, you mean you don't mind doing those things. Like I have no scruples with doing my errands today. I have no compunctions with Jeffrey Dahmer had no compunctions with eviscerating his victims. But I wanted to talk about the weather. I have no compunctions to walk. I have no compunctions to walk through puddles welling near. The only sophisticated vocabulary I've used so far is compunctions. It's my personal preference to try to make the poems more novel just by using words that you don't hear that often. I only recently discovered the word compunction. That's why I'm glad to use it in a poem right now, and I hope, you, whoever you are listening to this poetry session, would maybe pick up some new vocabulary words, because if there's one thing I'd like to contribute to the family of man is adding vocabulary, because god damn it, we are in a largely non-literary society, a largely non-sophisticated lingual culture. I have no compunctions to walk through puddles welling near. So I have no Punction. Okay, so it is 8-6. I want to make sure that the syllabic structure is actually correct. So now that we've clearly identified the subject, I've also selected the rhyme word that the fourth line is going to have to do. The third line can talk about anything, but the fourth line absolutely has to rhyme near with something. I have no compunctions to walk through puddles welling near. Well, why don't I mind walking through puddles? I don't mind walking through puddles because it's different than walking on the ground. It differs from some parched. I'm going to add an extra syllable there just to fill up the line. It differs from some parched grass. So, and I was watering my lawn earlier today, so I thought of the grass because it's yellow. It's my daily chore to water the plants around my property, and it's not particularly pleasing to me to find dried grass because clearly I have failed in some aspect. It differs from some parched grass, or common trotted green. I decided to use a slant rhyme there. I don't use slant rhymes that often, rhyming near with green. Slant rhyme just means that there is some similarity between the words, but the words, it's not a perfect rhyme. It's not like rhyming near with clear or rhyming clear with deer. It's near and green. They both have that slight E similarity. I do like using slant rhymes. Anything that adds variety to the poetry is normally good for the poetry. I think you want the language to be as varied as possible. I have no compunctions to, and also using the da 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 type structure when I use this. This is why I particularly like this stanza structure, the 8-6-8-6, is because of the emphasis that you can use on the words. I have no compunctions to walk through puddles welling near. It differs from some parched grass or common trotted green. So now moving on to the closer, the second half of the poem, lines 5 through 8. So so the speaker in this poem, being myself, is clearly saying that he likes walking through puddles because he doesn't care for walking through the green grass that everybody else goes through. The prickly bugs. Not even saying that, just saying prickly. Prickly bugs swarm to hug. Prickly bugs swarm to hug, and yet they do. To hug and kiss. Because, goddamn it, if these bugs ever just swarm around my face. They playfully... No, not playfully. Now, they being the bugs. I'm talking about the bugs now because apparently they're my only company on this walk through the grass. The walk through the puddles, rather. They welcome me. They welcome me to home. Because bugs normally spawn from ponds. Okay, so now we're approaching lines 7 and 8. Lines 7 and 8. Normally at this point when I write these poems, I like to wrap up the poem similar to the manner that it begun. Because if there's one failure that I notice in a lot of writing is people include a lot of elements, but they don't properly conclude them. A lot of elements just seem to be tossed in needlessly. So I like to wrap up. I like to it's kind of like opening and closing a circle. You want to open it, it spreads out wide, but then as you pass the halfway point, it comes to a close at the opposite end of the diameter. I have no compunctions to walk through puddles welling near. It differs from some parched grass or common trotted green. Prickly bugs swarm to hug and kiss. They welcome me to home. They welcome me to home. No, not my home. Oh, jeez. I gotta say, I'm glad that this is probably going to be one of my longer episodes because I spent a decent bulk of it just explaining shit, trying to wrap this up. Um, and it is good practice to work with some kind of pressure to just kind of like, okay, finish your thought before you lose it. I have no compunction. Differs from some parted grass or common trotted green. Prickly bugs swarm to hug and kiss. They welcome me to home. Their errands. Their errands satisfy from far. So it's like the narrator here seems to have. The narrator here appears to be some kind of loner. Their errands satisfy from far. No. Trying to think of a home. Home is a weird word to rhyme with. I mean, I could rhyme with comb, gnome, like lawn gnome. Their errands satisfy from far. I may have to do another slant rhyme in order to wrap up this poem because it's home is that's a doozy right there. I may have made a mistake in including that in line 6. They welcome me to home. Their errands satisfy from far. Uh. Oh, okay. Here we go. This is a nice humorous way to end the poem. But scratch the human dome! Exclamation point. um. Okay, so I kind of like this one. I gotta say, not even being that I just freaking wrote it, but it seems to suggest that there's some element of punishment from going onto the path less taken. To quote, oh jeez, who I have a name, Song of Myself. Whoever wrote Song of Myself from the 1800s, I think that's the person who wrote the line that I'm thinking of. This poem seems to say that when you go off the path less traveled, you're surrounded by strangers who will basically, their errands. They also share that they have to satisfy needs, but they also have no scruples with just scratching you up because that's what the bugs like to do. They like to swarm around my face when I'm going to get the mail. I go up to get the mail, and suddenly I have bugs just swarming my head because I'm already sweating, and bugs are attracted to sweat. So yeah, this is the poem from start to finish. I have no compunctions to walk through puddles welling near. It differs from some parched grass or common trotted green. Prickly bugs swarm to hug and kiss. They welcome me to home. Their errands satisfy from far, but scratch the human dome. The dome. As in get domed, as in get your head shot off by a sniper rifle, is what happened in a lot of the shooter games that I play. All right, and that's that. We call that a finished poem. I may even include this in my regular poem compilation because I try to write a poem a day. There's a poem right there that's fully written. 86868686. Home rhymes with dome. Near rhymes with green. And that's a finished poem. So, this has been Cloud9 Writes Poetry, Episode 1 with Emily Dickinson. And next week, I will look up another writer whose work I would love to include because I love to read about as much as I love to write. And remember, you have to do both. If you want to write, you got to read. And if you want to read, you got to write. The two go hand in hand, and without it, you don't have a plan. So thank you all for listening in. I hope you've enjoyed. Hope you learned something, because I will try to include as much of my experience, as much of my knowledge as possible. Maybe adding to yours. We will see. But thank you all so much for listening in once again, and I will see you all next week.